Questions from the audience? We got four great papers back there, way back in the room there.
I think I'm on. Jalapa, I was curious in your presentation when you were looking at targets and acquirers, Melanie Hall, I'm the commissioner in Montana, and I would say that we have had, I think it would be interesting to look at the underlying economic conditions and economic growth in the target and acquirers communities, because I think that, for instance, in Montana, you have low growth communities where but there's an acquirer who's looking for loan growth, who's going to be making more loans in the target community. So I think it could be an interesting data point to look at the underlying economic growth and economic conditions in both the target and the acquirers communities in looking at how that data plays out. Thank you.
Yes, so actually we look at county level economics data. So for each merger, so each of the county actually has that like per capita income, bankruptcy filing, unemployment, all the factors are at the county level. So we do account for that in the study. But thank you.
Alan?
Thanks very much. I want to say, first of all, this was one of the best. I've been coming to this conference for several years. This is one of the best sessions I've ever been to. So kudos to everybody on the session, including the two discussants. Very, very good, very informative. Let me make one sort of couple of general comments and two specific comments to help the researchers. The general comments are, first of all, I would like all of you to make sure you have your papers in the context of what does consolidation of the banking industry do to small business lending. Rebels is more like that, and some of them are more like that. But just make sure you have that as part of your ethos. Second general comment is there was a lot of talk about relationship lending, and it always sounds like relationship between the banks and the firms. And it's not really. Relationship lending is between loan officers primarily and the small business owners or managers. And so I'd like you to just keep that in mind. That's where the relationships are. That's where the soft information lies. Just two comments to improve the papers. They're all very good. One is on Rebel's paper. You emphasize the supply of credit. And in your model, you had two important supply factors, the size of the bank and the health of the bank. But I didn't see anything about the demand for credit. And Janet brought this up in her comments, too. So if you could control for and test some of the demand for credit, like what is the local unemployment rate or lagged unemployment rate in the local community, that would tell you something about the demand, and I think that would be good. And then for Nate's paper, I appreciate that you show that there's no reduction in the 7A lending in the local community, but I think you really should also look at other non-7A lending. And I know you don't have the data is not quite as good, but at least provide some anecdotal evidence that the other lending does not go down from the CRA data or something else. I would suggest you do that.
Margaret?
So I have one comment. Alan wasn't the first person to ask a question in this session.
I'd also like to make a quick response or a plea for assistance. So we would like to do that. We have these 6 industries, and I'm not aware of industry level data where we could.
No, but just generally, did the lending in those local communities, what happened to them?
Okay, we can do something like that for sure. Yeah.
Let's see, you got it right there. Down.
So this is for Nate. You show that Live Oak is finding new borrowers and presenting evidence that Live Oak carefully chooses industries it enters. How do these industries spread across the country? That is it possible or likely that Live Oak is choosing geographies implicitly when they're choosing industries explicitly?
That they're, just to make sure I understand the question, choosing industries that are located in areas that.
Season MSAs. I mean, so by entering into by by going into pharmacies, are they basically going into MSAs as opposed to non-MSAs?
Yeah, so we haven't looked at that explicitly, but looking at the set of industries, veterinarians, funeral homes, they do seem like things that would be spread fairly evenly across the country and not concentrated in MSAs. So that could be part of the implicit criteria of choosing the industry. That's a good idea, and we could check. So one area where we want to move forward in this paper is instead of looking at the effects of entry, backing up and looking at how are these industries different from the rest and how are they making this choice. But that's a great hypothesis to explore, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, Flora?
So I'm Flora Ma from the University of South Carolina. So I have one question to the second paper by Jalapa. So you use 1 year time window. So I'm wondering, did you try different time windows? Because I'm thinking that the M8 event maybe the target may be special prior to the M8 event. Will the results still hold or the effect even stronger? So could you comment on that?
Okay, so it's 1 year window. Say that again. So what we're looking, actually, we are looking at the change from the year before, the T-1. So if it's the T is the year of the merger, right? We look at change between T-1 to T+1. So that's the 2 year window, right?
So did you look at like maybe two year prior to MA event or different 2 years and after?
No, 1 year after. So yes, we could expand the performance observation period from 1 to 2 years. Yes, thank you.
Robin?
Is this on? So I have a question for Nathaniel. So we heard a lot about how small business lending tends primarily to be very local. Small businesses going to their local branch, and sort of following up on something that Janet said, like how is it that Live Oak is matching up with these customers? How are they finding the customers? How are the customers finding them? Because they're doing something that's quite different than most small business lenders and most SBA lenders in particular.
So this is something that we're exploring. So the two potential explanations for where these new borrowers coming from, they may not have been able to get credit from an existing bank, and so that would be sort of the credit deepening story, or what it sounded like Janet suggested is more of a marketing story, or they're going out and reaching these places that haven't had access. We're limited somewhat in what we can observe about the borrowers, so observable characteristics to just see in the data how they differentiate from people, but I guess online advertising or reaching out would be a part of it.
So my guess is that if you went to the association meetings for any of those industries, you would find those
Yes.
business development officers there handing out lots of business cards and telling their story.
No, yeah, we have seen that in the associations for these. There's a few banks that specialize in overlapping with Live Oak in some of these same industries, but that's one way of getting it.
How about you just ask Live Oak?
We're reaching out to them. That's on the agenda. Yeah, we have reached out.
Yeah.
And I guess just following up on the same question, how dependent or how much do you think you can interpret how dependent that model is on a guarantee? And because you're showing that the proximity matters less, and I'm wondering how much of that is connected to a federal guarantee being behind it. Because we probably can't guarantee the entire, guarantee the entire.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about how externally valid our results are, extrapolating them, so one of the things we showed is that Live Oak is not unique in that there are a lot of remote lenders specializing in certain industries within SBA lending, so we're fairly comfortable extrapolating for them. Going outside of that, you have to widen the confidence intervals and make more assumptions. So the risks definitely are different lending without this government guarantee. It's a partial guarantee, but the guarantee is there. So I mean, we're thinking about that, but I don't want to say anything definitive yet about how generalizable this is in a different setting.
Yeah, Julie?
Thank you. Julie Stackhouse. So I guess I'm not sure who I want to pose this question to, Jen. Maybe it's you. Given your comment about the fires in California and the effect of what I'll call algorithmic lending. So it's everywhere, right? It's Cabbage, it's Lenny Club, it's Square Capital, you can name it. Yet it really is based on either cash flow or some type of algorithm that is dependent on good economic times or good conditions. And yet the conditions change, it's not there. We haven't had an economic downturn for a while. If that were to occur, what should we expect to see in your opinion, and how can community banks respond to that, particularly when community banks in some communities will no longer be there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Having been through several cycles myself and experiencing that with borrowers, it's the same thing I worry about with like Rocket Mortgage. If those organizations are making a significant number of loans and we don't really know to whom and how it's happening, when they exit the market, and they will, they'll just stop. What happens? Where's that capital going to come from? Where's that access to credit going to come from? If the one little story that I told you about Cabbage is indicative, the capital is going to dry up and those businesses will just shut down. That if we had not lent that man that money, literally that day, he had no options, none. And a lot of small business owners are, those mom and pop small business owners they ride on a very thin line. So my expectation is that community banks, if they are in community and they're still there and they're still able to do the things that we do today, that they will try hard to pick up the slack. Now, one of the things that I heard in papers, that I read in some of the papers, and I'm not going to remember which one, is the assumption that this relational lending doesn't depend on good credit factors. No bank that I've ever worked in had the privilege of making a loan to somebody on their signature. A long time ago maybe, but not recently. We're evaluated by our regulators based on the underwriting standards that we have in place. I don't care how big or small you are. So, we're still looking at good credit. Good credit matters. So when the economic cycle turns down and credit starts to get to be not quite so good as it is today, it's going to be harder for businesses to get loans, and it's going to be harder for them to pay them back. And we're going to have the same kind of issues we have had in every credit cycle, where some people will go out of business. So, one of the things that happens in community banks, they don't have the resources that a big bank has. So when the cycle turns, the people who were making the loans are now the people who are going to collect the loans. It happens because there's just not enough hands, and they have to have credit experience in order to be able to have those conversations and follow up with those borrowers. Big banks take a different trend. They'll just say, okay, well, we'll just send it all out to a collector, we'll shut down this division, we'll just stop making loans for a while, we'll go focus over here because we can make more money doing it. So we have different alternatives. It all adds up to less credit available.
Is that telling me that we're done? It's turned, that little sign I'm looking at has turned a strange color of purple. And so I think that means that time is up. Let's give a round of applause for a great presentation.